Panicked and chained up, Katie and Sloane are in the middle of the woods. Jed, one of the kidnappers, approaches them and tells them they'll be living here from now on and gives them the basic amenities for survival, such as clothes, a bed, and a toilet. Before continuing the story, let's see how they got there. It all starts when two best friends, Katie and Sloane, decide to take a trip out of town. They're going to work at a farm for a month, saving up to go shopping in New York. The next morning, Katie's police uncle Jason picks them up. They'll spend a night at Jason and his girlfriend's place before heading to the farm. Sloane suggests they come up with fake names while they're in town. She comes up with the name Heather and Katie with Ripley. The next day, Uncle Jason drops them off at the train station, from where they take the bus to the farm. Jason tells them to text him a code in case they get into trouble. After the uncles leave, the girls still have to wait for the bus, which is due to arrive in about an hour, and they decide to wait in a cafe. They immediately attract the attention of two local guys and end up sharing a table with them. The two women introduce themselves with the fake names they made up the night before, while the two men introduce themselves as brothers, named Jed and Lucas. The brothers offer to drive them to their place of work, and although Katie is reluctant, she gives in to Sloane's silent plea. Eventually, they get into the young men's blue truck. But things don't go as planned. Jed deliberately drives past the farmhouse where Katie and Sloane were supposed to go. This confuses the two women, and finally, they arrive at an old house, which Jed says is their family home. They are greeted by Jed and Luca's mother, who invites them to tea before heading to the farm. Once inside, Katie receives a message from her uncle. She lets him know that they're fine, thanks to the safety words they've agreed on. Meanwhile, they eat pie and drink tea, which they probably shouldn't, but do anyway. Suddenly, their eyesight is blurred, and it turns out there's a drug in their drink. They immediately run for their lives, realizing that something is wrong. Unfortunately, Jed and Lucas manage to knock them out and bring them back inside. The next day, Katie and Sloane are panicked and chained up in the middle of the woods. Jed approaches them and tells them they'll be living here from now on and gives them some clothes, a bed, and a toilet. Later, Jed's boss, Boris, arrives and takes Katie's phone to check if anyone knows where they are. He then discovers that Katie and Sloane have lied about their names and forces them to tell him that the word apple is a security word. Afterwards, Katie and Sloane get ready for a shower. Just then, the town sheriff arrives, gun in hand. Turns out the sheriff is a piece of shit who condones human trafficking and has come to rape one of the women. Once the evil sheriff has had his fill, Sloane visits a shaken Katie to appease her. On the other side of town, Uncle Jason is worried, as the last message he received from Katie contains the same safe word she used yesterday. Back in the woods, Jed and Lucas welcome another customer. He picks up Sloane and takes her inside. Unsurprisingly, the guy's a psychopath. Back at Jason, he makes a call to Sloane and Katie's workplace and learns that they didn't show up for work yesterday. Convinced they're in trouble, he rushes off to find them. Meanwhile, Sloane and Katie's day is about to get worse, as the next customer who shows up is even shadier than the last one. Jed and Lucas rush to cover their heads as the next customer approaches. The guy in the pig mask grabs Sloane and takes her inside. After he leaves, Katie goes to see Sloane, shaken. We don't know exactly what the guy in the pig mask did to her, but Sloane seems even more traumatized than before. In the next scene, Jason arrives at the sheriff's office and comes face to face with the town's perverted sheriff we saw earlier. We then learn that the uncle is not only a cop, but also an FBI agent. He expresses his concerns and is convinced that his niece has been kidnapped, and tells the sheriff that he knows they're in trouble because Katie didn't use a new code word in the last message she sent. Back in the woods, the sheriff obviously informed the kidnappers that Katie's uncle is an FBI agent and that Katie lied to them about the password. Not wanting the FBI to interfere, Boris asks Jed to kill them both and dispose of their bodies. Unbeknownst to them, Katie is listening in. Meanwhile, Jason goes to the cafe where he dropped Katie and Sloane off last time. He asks the barista what he knows, and the barista describes the truck they got into. The next day, Katie tells Sloane they are planning to kill them, shortly before the kidnappers arrive with the psycho from last time. They leave him to keep an eye on them. Katie takes the opportunity to seduce him, and once she's close enough, she bites his throat with her teeth and then frees Sloane. Afterwards, the sheriff arrives on the scene, presumably to kill them, but as soon as he gets out of his car, Katie and Sloane steal him away. They return to town and head to the hardware store to gear up. It's about to go down. They ask the cashier if he knows Boris, the man with the blue truck, and the cashier knows where he lives. Jason goes to the town's auto insurance office. He invents a story about an accidental collision with a blue truck and asks who owns it. Afterwards, Boris goes home in a hurry. Katie and Sloane surprise him and throw studded tennis balls at him. Now that the roles are reversed, Boris begs for his life, even offering his money in exchange. Just then, Jason pulls up in front of Boris's house. Back inside, Katie and Sloane begin questioning him about the identity of the man in the pig mask. When Boris refuses to reveal it, Katie and Sloane take a spear they've made and shove it up his bum. When Jason finally enters the house, it appears that Katie and Sloane have left, and he sees Boris dying. In the next scene, the sheriff informs Jason that Boris hasn't survived. Worried, Jason calls Katie's number, but, realizing his cover is blown, the sheriff pulls out his gun. Katie and Sloane pull up in front of a church, and we learn that the man in the pig mask is in fact the town priest. Sloane enters the church and comes face to face with her raper. With Katie's help, the two friends take the villain down. Katie and Sloane drive away, with the priest chained behind the truck the whole time. They cover him with holy gasoline and set him on fire before driving off. Elsewhere, Jason is now being held captive by the sheriff. It seems that the sheriff has captured two new young women. Fortunately, Katie and Sloane come to the rescue. They tie up the sheriff and torture him with a game of Russian roulette. It's clear that the two women are a little unhinged, but in a way, we can't blame them. The sheriff starts yelling about how sorry he is, but Katie ends up finishing him off with one blow. Next, they free the women and tell them to free Jason. Jason asks them who killed the sheriff, but they don't answer out of gratitude. Next, Katie and Sloane go to Jed and Luca's mother's house and drug her the same way she drugged them a few days ago. They tie her up and take her to the basement, where Jed is bound and gagged. They start beating him over the head with baseball bats while the mother watches. Then they take him to Lucas, who is also tied to a chair. However, instead of beating him to death, they untie him, give him a bat, and threaten to beat his own mother. When Lucas refuses, they shoot him. Then, the two women set up Lucas's body in such a way that it appears to have committed suicide. They reveal that they intend to pin all the murders on him. Desperate, the mother offers them money in exchange for her life, but instead of sparing her, Katie takes the lawnmower and kills her with it.